We'll stop once again with Rick Shefton. He's been on the show before, and it's great to talk with him once again. New Jersey consultant that worked at one point in time with Steve Lonegan's campaign. What are you up to in South Carolina these days? And I guess you're going up the coast right now here, Rick.
Well, there was a Tea Party convention this weekend. It's several hundred, about 600, I think 600 good Americans who are trying to save our country from these communists in Washington, D.C. who want to turn us into some third world nation. Louis Gohmert was really one of the highlights. I mean, he's great. His view is that we're elected to be conservatives. We're not elected to try to make deals with liberals. He's right.
And I think it's come to the point where with Lindsey Graham, he's made so many dirty deals with liberals, and him and John McCain have turned this country into something that it's not. And they like to talk about compromise, but for some reason, the people that are getting the best deal out of that compromise is Democrats, time and time again. What are we getting out of it is the big question as conservatives.
Well, the good news, first of all, is that Lindsey Graham's not going to be a U.S. Senator a year from now. And that his colleague, Senator Tim Scott, refuses to endorse him is significant. So mocking Lindsey Graham was really the focus of the entire weekend. It just seemed to be the theme, the underlying theme. There are 4 candidates running. There's 2 that I see that particularly stand out, which is Senator Lee Bright and Bill Connor, seem to be particularly strong. I like Richard Cash, so that he's delivered a little dry. Nancy Mace, another person running, I was not as impressed with her, but I was very impressed with Connor and with Bright. Either one of them is going to be strong. There's some concerns about Bright in a runoff because he's got some financial issues, which they're significant personal financial issues that a lot of people think could make him vulnerable. Connor is very strong. Bill Connor is a very strong candidate. South Carolina is going to have is going to have 2 conservative U.S. senators next year at this time.
You do really believe that, regardless of how much money Lindsey Graham has in organization?
He could have $100 billion. He's not going to get reelected, except if he gets in a runoff with a candidate who's flawed. And the question is Senator Bright flawed because of his financial issues? He's certainly running the most aggressive campaign, the strongest campaign. But there's a concern about that. He's in a big bankruptcy right now. It's a significant issue, fair or unfair. And so that's the one thing that perhaps Graham might have going for him. But Senator Graham's problem is that he's just been with the other side too much. It's not really a surprise for anybody listening. He's been one of these Republicans who wants to support Obama as much as he can. But the people who vote in Republican primaries are not fond of that. What people like about Senator Graham in the state is his pro-defense posture, his questioning on Benghazi. People think that even though he's wrong on a lot of issues, that at least he stands up for what he believes in a positive sense for him. But overall, people in the state they just want to have a conservative senator. They want to have 2 conservative senators. They don't see why they should have 1 conservative senator or 1 senator who's voted with Barack Obama half the time when it counts.
You know, when you look at Lindsey Graham and all his votes with votes for Barack Obama, with Barack Obama, however you want to put it, and the coziness that he has with Democrats in the Senate. I've been following your timeline on Facebook, and somebody wrote that, hey, this would be fine in New Jersey, where you're from, but it's just not going to work in South Carolina at all. And the South Carolina electorate is much more conservative than any state in the country, really, when you think about it.
There's concern because there's no party registration in South Carolina, as in the case of most southern states. So what happens is Democrats, as South Carolina becomes a one-party Republican state, where Republicans essentially win all statewide offices, which is where they are. They have commanding majorities in both houses of the legislature, 6-1 in the House delegation of both U.S. senators. That's not going to change anytime soon. So people who are Democrats, a lot of times will not vote in the Republican primary because why not? Or they could vote in the Republican runoff. And South Carolina is unique among all states with a runoff because the runoff is 2 weeks after the primary, so June 10th and June 24th. So whoever gets in that runoff, whether it's with Lindsey Graham or any other office for that matter, any of the state offices. They elect almost the entire cabinet, the entire governor's cabinet, and lieutenant governor are all elected separately. So all of these people will there will be any number of runoffs, but it's within 2 weeks. So it's a very compressed time frame. And those 2 weeks between the 10th and the 24th, all the attention nationally will be on the runoff that Lindsey Graham will inevitably be facing.
When you look at, you mentioned this Lee Bright, who you said was dealing with bankruptcy. Do you ever see a situation where, Bill Connor and Lee Bright tend to be the strongest candidates, and they're in a situation where they split the conservative vote that helps Lindsey Graham, or do you see that scenario playing out at all, or do you see eventually one of them dropping out?
It's not a problem in South Carolina because it's a runoff state. So the goal is the more candidates in the race, the better. If there are 30 candidates in the race, it's just more people pulling out votes to get Lindsey Graham under 50%. If Lindsey Graham's at 49.99%, he has to go into another election 2 weeks later. And with 4 candidates who are going to all be pulling votes out and raising lots of money, and there'll be lots of national money, outside national money, of course, coming in on both sides, the turnout's going to be fairly high. And it's extremely difficult from the polling that I've seen in South Carolina. It's extremely difficult for me to see a scenario where Lindsey Graham gets that 50%.
One of the things that was most impressive to me in the debate when I saw Bill Connor waving around the pocket Constitution. Now, at first I thought, well, maybe this is just a little bit hokey. I'm wondering how this is going to play out. But it really played well for him in that debate. He really used that well. And then all of a sudden, his personality came out, and he seemed like a very strong person who really knows the Constitution real well with that pocket Constitution he's waving around.
Well, he's got the advantage of a military background, and I think he's, in that sense, I mean, Nancy Mace also has that, but I think Connor's, it's a recent military background. It contrasts with Graham's strengths, and that's what makes him a potentially very dangerous candidate in the runoff with Graham. I would say out of the 4 of them, the one that Lindsey Graham does not want to be in a runoff with is Bill Connor. At this time, I mean, things can change. So, but that's how I would see that.
Lee Bright, does he have to dig himself out of a hole? Is there any, when you look at his campaign and when we're dealing with money issues, is there any way that he can overcome these obstacles, or what does he have to do?
It's hard to say. He's got a very aggressive ground operation. People who are at Republican meetings with literature, and it's targeted, and it's well thought out, and he seems to have a good team behind him. And what can you do? It is what it is. You can't change your financial circumstances. People are willing to listen to why you're in this situation, and they'll make a determination. Does somebody's financial situation have anything to do with his qualifications to be a U.S. senator, or her in some cases? And that's really the open question there.
One of the things that I'm seeing as a theme in this race that really stands out from other races is that you have a lot of liberty-minded conservatives in this race, where they just have that touch of libertarianism that attracts the conservative voter, of really making government smaller and bringing it into its constitutional bounds. Did you see that in the debate?
Yes, I think that's the future of the Republican Party. To me, the Republican Party coalition are libertarian-minded voters and cultural conservatives, and I don't see that as a mutually exclusive thing. People who are libertarian have to understand that they want their taxes cut. The people who are going to cut them are the people who are against abortion, and people who are against abortion have to understand that the people who are going to outlaw abortion are going to be people who are going to cut taxes. We're all a team. This is something the left understands. There are going to be certain issues that are going to fade in significance over time. Others take over. Unfortunately, the marriage issue's fading away. It is. But there are other issues that get stronger, and people have to build coalitions. The left, they all stick together. You used to hear of conservative Democrats. Conservative Democrats today vote with Obama 100% of the time. They have no choice. That's the way that they're forced to be because of the nature of the Democratic primary. we have to do the same in the Republican primaries and make sure that some people who are weaker philosophically feel the heat a little bit and decide that they have to do the right thing.
One of the things that I found that was interesting in the primary debate was bringing up impeaching federal judges. This has not been brought up enough. And what are your thoughts on that in the debate? Does it serve a good purpose? Is it a good idea to impeach federal judges?
I don't really see it happening because you need 67 votes to convict. So to get 67 votes, you need to have 67 senators that are going to possibly vote for that. And I don't see that happening at the present time. And right now the goal is to get 54, 55 senators. That would be great. Remember, we have a couple of rhinos in there. So I think the goal for this election right now is to get 51 conservative senators, which means Susan Collins doesn't count. Lisa Murkowski doesn't count. Heaven forbid you got Lindsey Graham. He doesn't count either. So 51 conservative or pretty conservative votes. That'll be solid on federal judges for the next president, who hopefully will be a conservative and not Hillary Clinton or somebody in that ilk.
When you look back at the debate that they had with the South Carolina primary at this Tea Party group, what were the biggest things that you took away from this as far as some of the topics that were discussed, and what were some of the, let's say, like the top three highlights that you saw from the debate?
Well, the hot topic down there is Common Core. Common Core is a very big issue with grassroots conservatives in South Carolina and around the country. People are waking up to this. They realize that it's Obamacare for education is what it is. That they don't like the federal intrusion into what's something that's seen as a local parental, a local affair that parents and teachers and school boards work out curriculum. Instead, we're going to have national standards. People say, okay, we need national standards. We have to compete with Finland and South Korea and Indonesia and all these other places. All these numbers are subjective. What do they mean? How do you compete? How? It's an expensive way. People are making a lot of money. Just out of that, we're going to have this national one-size-fits-all. Everybody's going to be the same. There's another angle about that really bothers people, and that's this political correctness angle that's into this, where there's left-wing revisionist history. We're going to have national history standards drawn up by left-wing liberals. And there's a lot of question as to different standards. Texas, for example, has their own standards. And Texas seems to be doing just fine with standards that the people who are designing Common Core think are Neanderthal.
One of the things that comes up quite a bit that we see is that the Senate Conservatives Fund and also folks like Eric Erickson, they kind of stay away from the South Carolina race. I heard one interview where Eric Erickson says that he just kind of thinks that, because there's not money and there's not the organization that he's used to, I guess, is that, who knows what's going to happen to that race. Could be up in the air. It might or might not be. What are your thoughts about the Senate Conservatives Fund and other groups like the Club for Growth not getting involved in this race, or should they get involved in this race, or maybe they have a different strategy altogether? What's your take on that?
There's clearly no one who takes the mantle of being the free enterprise candidate exclusively. Yeah, and it's what I've been advising clients is to sit back till the runoff, where their significance can be important. It's up to these candidates to make the case that they should be the one to face Lindsey Graham in a runoff. It's unlikely Lindsey Graham will finish third in this race. He'll be one of the top two and probably the first place finisher. So people are trying to get 20, 22, 25% of the vote so that they can get in the runoff. And it's a question of developing a base. It's a question of showing that you're the strongest candidate to take on Graham in that runoff on June 24th. So from the point of view of the Senate Conservatives Fund, the Club for Growth, and others, they're doing the right thing sitting back. There are other races, Mississippi, for example, with Chris McDaniel against Thad Cochran, and there's so many others, I could just keep naming them, where there are clear matchups. It's a one-on-one situation, or essentially a one-on-one situation, and it's very different. And here you have four people who are all vying to be the challenger, and let the process sort itself out, let them get their own grassroots support, and there's no reason for these outside groups to come in. It's actually better that they don't. Why should they pick somebody? Let the people of South Carolina pick their senator.
You know, there have been times where some of these groups, and I believe this is the case in some races, where, hey, you know what, we're not going to back this person because we believe that he is a novice, or he doesn't have the ground game, he doesn't have the experience, or many other different factors that don't qualify him to be that, I hate this word, but sometimes it is used, the electable candidate. What's your take on that?
There are points, there are times when that's correct, and I've told that to people, and I tell them don't run. You're not ready to run. Oh, I'm going to run a grassroots campaign. I don't need to raise any money. I'm going to have the people behind me. No, you're not. Because when your opponent sticks a flamethrower on you and talks about every little thing you ever did, and you have no money to kick him back or her back, then what's the point? You're going to lose. You're going to have the kids are going to have to watch this on TV. I mean, your friends, everything. It's people need to go into battle armed properly. They can't just run for the sake of run. Oh, somebody needs to run. No, they don't. Somebody doesn't need to run. It's just you're real. These are real people. It's not just names of stuffed figures that are put on the ballot. Real people who have to live with the fact they're going to lose an election. Why should people stick their necks out in a Republican primary or in a general election to lose unless they feel, okay, the Republican Party needs a candidate in this district. No one wants to run. I'll carry the ball for the Republican Party. But to run against an incumbent and not be prepared to run, or to run in any kind of primary and not be prepared to run a viable campaign, that's just not a good idea. So I've said that to people. You're not ready. You're not going to raise. You're not raising money. Oh, well, because nobody. I don't have a political machine. I can't raise money. I can't this, that, whatever excuse. But actually, what it is that you can raise money. You've got people, got friends. Oh, well, my friends don't think I can win. Okay, so maybe that tells you something. People have to gain a certain degree of credibility. The best way to get credibility with these outside groups is to show the local people support you. And it's true with any kind of trade organization. If you want to get the funeral directors PAC to give you money, make sure the local funeral directors are supporting your campaign. And there's 100,000 other groups like that. So every group, the plumbers, everybody has a PAC and a group, and realtors and everybody who supports people. So you have to show that you have support by raising money. That's what shows support, that people will contribute. They'll give their own money to a candidate. Then they'll stick their name on a petition or pose for a photo because that's free. It doesn't mean anything.
As far as a state that does have a runoff, is money not as big of a factor as if the state did not have a runoff, that you would have to have a primary where, whoever got the largest percent, no matter what it is, they're gonna win the nominee? Correct.
So there's just the primary. I mean, where you have a runoff, the history of the runoff election was in one-party southern states, where there was no Republican Party, or the Republican Party wasn't a major factor or any kind of serious factor in any part of the state. So everybody was a Democrat. So they had to have the runoff was essentially like the general election. It was a de facto general election. Now, North Carolina and Tennessee, or Virginia and Tennessee, had a bigger Republican Party, and they didn't have runoffs because they couldn't. They were a little more competitive. East Tennessee, Southwest Virginia. In North Carolina, there were two factions in the state, and they would rotate the governorship between the eastern and the western parts of the state. So they had a runoff, but it was pretty much a custom of this thing. So North Carolina was a little different, but your deep southern states all had runoffs. because there were no Republicans.
You know, it's interesting that now that we're talking about runoffs, you know, you get the wheel spinning in your head. You're thinking to yourself, well, an incumbent in the Senate or in Congress, they must hate runoff states, being part of a runoff state, because they have a greater chance of getting knocked out. Do you think that the establishment, some states might look at this and say, hey, guess what? We need to change. We need to get together with whoever we need to get with to change the laws to get rid of the runoff rule for the state so that we can have some incumbency protection, if you want to call it. Is that scenario ever played out?
Well, in Florida. Florida got rid of their runoffs a few years back. I don't see it happening in any of these other states because there's just too many factions. There's no Florida is just a kind of a free-for-all state anyway. But these other states have established factions, and Florida is the most northern of all the southern states. So Florida, and then Virginia also, right? Kind of a northern southern state in a lot of places. So it's really more of a deep southern thing, and it also. In these states, they're now one-party states again. Except instead of them being one-party Democratic states, they're one-party Republican states, and that's where the runoff is significant because the Republican primary is really the election. South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, Texas, they're going to have runoffs, and as it turns out, they've really become pretty much one-party states. Tennessee doesn't have a runoff, though, but has never had one.
Rick, well, we sure appreciate you stopping by. Rick Shafton, he ran, he played a big part in the Steve Lonegan campaign, the run for Senate in New Jersey. And every time I talk to you, I'm always educated on something that I did not know about, and I've learned something new. So we really appreciate you stopping by today.